Gentlemen, do you hate cardio? Do you feel like it's a waste of your time? Because the bang for your buck that you get in the gym, you spend 30 minutes in the gym, you get a great return on your time investment. You spend 95,000 minutes on the treadmill and you'll burn 5 calories. Well, if you've been wondering what the perfect forms of cardio are, the S tier, the A tier, B, C, D, wonder no longer. So today we're gonna look at how you can leverage cardio to further strengthen your inner framework and just the capacity that you have physically, but also to serve your life better. Most men look at cardio as a form of punishment if they ate poorly one week or a day, or if they mess up on their diet, or possibly a necessary evil, a short-term plan, so that you can kind of get to that point where you finally see your abs. In my opinion, this is a fragile, short-term, and short-sighted way to view it. So even outside of the aesthetics, outside of the vanity side of things, which we certainly have to acknowledge, cardio is truly the engine of your physical dependency. If your children playing at the playground, or if they're in physical danger. And if the moment comes where you need to arise to it and you gas out, then you failed. So looking at these various forms of cardio, we're going to analyze it from these 3 criteria to kind of rank them. 1, can you do this sustainably for the next 40 years? I think this question will really shape your approach, and it will certainly bias how these things rank in your life. Like if you're 40, and you're thinking about, okay, what forms of cardio optimal for me? But ultimately, that's gonna be a different question than it is for me at the age of 25, almost 26. Number 2 is looking at the recovery cost. Importantly, will this affect, ruin, or degrade your ability to strength train effectively and get the physique that you want to build and or maintain? And does it make you exhausted, irritable, and not wanting to go on walks with your family or something because you hit your 3-mile, 5-mile, 10-mile run in the morning? And then number 3, for your personal context, does this make you a more capable man in your daily life? So we'll start broadly with zone 2 cardio, thinking jogging, cycling, incline treadmill, rowing, things like that. Zone 2 is about 60 to 70% of your cardio capacity, your max heart rate, which you can calculate pretty easily. It's like your age subtracted off of a specific number that I'll put on screen here, and that's like your max. So then you just do the math based on what zone you're targeting to figure out what heart rate you want to be sitting at. This does build mitochondrial density, and it does certainly teach your body to use fat as a fuel source. I forgot to say that this is A tier. It builds a massive aerobic base without all that much stress and tax on your central nervous system. That is a win, because that's something that you can sustain for a long period of time. However, some of the downside does come to discipline. It's boring, and it requires you to kind of almost force yourself to ease off the pedal and go low and slow. So there are ways to stack it and make it a little bit more time efficient. However, if you don't enjoy cardio, this one's not gonna be the sustainable route for you. And I'm speaking from personal experience. I tried to adopt running into my regimen for probably 2 or 3 months or so. It was starting off good. I did a lot better when I had friends to run with and jog with. We'd probably average a 10-minute mile, go 2 or 3 miles. Doing it by myself was absolutely a slog. It felt like meditation some days, and it felt like torture on others. So it just wasn't a consistent thing for me. And then additionally, as I introduced a more aggressive calorie deficit, my knees started to hurt and I started to feel it. So again, this is kind of where some context and just your own personal traits, preferences come into play as to how high or low this will rank. But I would say overall, like just from an objective standpoint, definitely A tier, maybe S tier. Before I beat this horse to death, and before we move on to the next source of cardio, if you love cardio, if that's your jam, if you just enjoy long runs and doing that for yourself, I think this is where this becomes S tier for you, because you can remove any psychological downsides, and you might even have to like fight against the urge to do some of these more extreme forms of cardio. But thinking about balance overall in terms of like having the bandwidth left and the fuel in the tank to spend on daily life, active recovery things, but most importantly, strength training, this is gonna be where your dollar really gets that bang for your buck. Next up, we're talking zone 3 to 4, kind of the more heavier stuff that I was alluding to previously. This is gonna fall into the C tier in my opinion. Definitely does fall into the category of like the steady state cardio. We're not in like punishment zone quite yet, but it almost becomes, this is the I'm going to jog 3 miles as hard as I can mindset. And this is kind of where it feels like a gray zone. So unlike zone 2, it's too intense to build up your aerobic base efficiently like zone 2 does. And yet it's not quite hard enough to trigger an anaerobic adaptation of like a true sprint, like a high intensity interval training, which we will get to. There are a couple of runs that I took with friends where it fell right into this category. Ultimately, it just generates systemic fatigue and some heavy joint wear and tear, even if you are doing lighter stuff in terms of form of cardio like rowing or cycling as opposed to running, not fully optimal. So not bad, but there's just things that we can leverage to give us better results overall. I alluded to it previously, looking at high intensity interval training. This one is gonna get a B tier rating. Incredibly effective for raising your VO2 max. One of the most important markers for longevity and overall health, although the recovery cost is significant. Back when I struggled with cutting, with weight loss, with calorie management, I thought high intensity interval training would be my go-to, my perfect thing, because the time investment that you put into it versus how many calories you burn straight up is pretty good, like pretty good bang for your buck. However, there's no free lunch, and so your glycogen gets chronically depleted, especially if you're doing this 4 to 5 times a week. Your joints ache and your central nervous system does get heavily taxed, especially if that's on top of strength training session. Commonly, a lot of guys will end their strength training sessions, whether they're lifting 3 to 5 times a week, they'll end it with a 20-minute HIIT session. And by the end of it, you are just blown. You're completely blown. So then ultimately a fried CNS leads to a really short fuse that you have for wife, kids, girlfriend, family, work, kind of like just being a human being outside of the gym. So if you do want to leverage high intensity interval training, and you can combine these things, like you can do one thing a week, you can do another thing a couple times a week, you can kind of stack these if you would like. I don't, but treat it like a scalpel, not like a what's the hammer, sledgehammer. Use it at 1 to maybe 2 times a week to sharpen your base, but not using it as the foundation. Okay, then next up, I wanted to talk about this one first because this is my favorite. I'm incredibly biased towards it, and that's why it's getting an S tier, which is walking, getting your steps in. When it comes to that first question under the criteria, walking, unless you get hit by a bus, this is something you can do and should do for the rest of your life. Even though it's not like the VO2 max assassin that some other zones of cardio are, in a lot of blue zones, areas where people live to 100 plus years old, one of the greatest things that can be identified, besides like lack of processed foods, is how many steps they take in a day and how long of distances they have to walk, like not having cars, stuff like that. So this is the only form that is not a workout, but walking is a baseline requirement for just being a healthy human. Like you gotta just do it. If you're going to think about cardio, think about how you can burn more calories efficiently and consistently, you might as well just do what you have to do. So talking ROI, there is pretty much zero recovery cost. The only way that you could like tax yourself by doing it is if you're not wearing the proper footwear when you're doing your 8 to 12,000 steps a day, like if you're wearing high heels. There was a day that I did that in like Chelsea boots and kind of doing the other walks in the next leading few days. My knees and my hips specifically were like, ooh, not so happy right now. So making sure that you have comfortable footwear that's good for high mileage. But you can still walk 12,000 steps today. Tomorrow, hit a heavy leg day, even walk like 10,000 steps that day, and then just keep doing that every single day. Walking regulates blood sugar, it drops cortisol levels, and it certainly does help to clear the mind. And in that vein, this is why, additionally, I think it is absolutely S tier, is what you can do while you're doing it. You can talk, you can jump on phone calls, conference calls, you can pray. It serves time as decompression, and it is absolutely a tool that can help offset some mental stressors, mental health problems that you might be kind of wrestling through. Your dog and your family, you can push the stroller. Like this is the most busy life compatible one possible. And then if you throw in the walking pad, that's where the game changes. You throw down at 2.2 miles an hour, give or take, while you're doing work at your desk. And then it simultaneously offsets the downsides of sitting at a desk all day while getting in your 8,000 steps. Okay, last form of cardio, we're talking about the punishment zone. Zone 4 or 5, that really just balls to the walls, tough mudder. You're training to just absolutely kill yourself. Maybe you're trying to do those like trail running things where you go 100 miles. This is not healthy. This is not good. Thinking even like just burpees to exhaustion. You get sloppy. And when you get sloppy, this is just kind of like the CrossFit effect. When you get sloppy, when your technique starts to go out the window, your risk for injury skyrockets by 100-fold. This is commonly where the people who view cardio as a form of punishment for a lack of discipline or a lack of locking into a diet, this is kind of where they default to. They just swing from one extreme to the other, and it pays very little rewards. It has basically zero utility, and it's fully reliant on motivation and self-hatred, which are not sustainable forms. Like, that's not gonna fuel you for the next 40 years. And even if you can mentally do it for the next 40 years, the likelihood of you being able to physically handle it, you've probably just burned yourself out. But if you're going Cam Hanes style, kind of the bow hunter guy, you're running a marathon a day, you're not gonna be able to do that. You're not Cam Hanes, you're just not that guy. Okay, I lied. The actual last form of cardio will be rucking. And not talking military style where you throw on like 100 to 200 pounds on your back and just go for 10 miles. Talking about just hitting your steps, but maybe with somewhere between 10 to 30 extra pounds on you. And that's a great tool. This should be utilized more so as that scalpel piece where this isn't gonna be your daily driver, if that makes sense, but you might bust this out a few times a week. Thinking with high intensity interval training, you could do that, 1, maybe 2 times a week. This, you could pull out 2, 3, really what your body can handle. The calorie deficit or surplus that you're in is gonna mega impact this as far as what your body can take, how you're sleeping. If you guys are curious about sleep, I just made a video on it here that you can check out after this video is done, but it's just about done. But if you made it this far of me yapping, you might as well stick to the end. So when it comes to building your system, so I don't want this tier list just to leave you with a bunch of different options that I think are good. I want to develop an actionable prescription, if you will. So I would say the bare minimum where you need to start, the foundation, and the pipe that you're gonna lay is gonna be 8 to 12,000 steps a day, every single day, or 80% of the time if you can't hit every single day. Next, if you feel like you want a little bit more cardiovascular capacity building in your regimen, or if you aren't feeling like you can shave the weight off, like you got the stubborn body fat that you've been trying to target, and you don't want to go into 300, 200 calories more of a deficit than what you're currently doing, adding a couple sessions of zone 2, maybe 1 session of HIIT, or a few sessions of rucking at like 30 minutes, that's gonna help build the engine. I think that's a great place to start. As always, make sure that you're not trading more cardio for less lifting. That's not a good one. And then last but not least, if you're really just like, oh, I'm doing these things and like, I feel like I'm just missing something, or I have so much free time and I wanna just slay this cut, get it over with. Throw on 1 session of high intensity sprints to just build that ceiling. So ultimately, cardio isn't about burning calories on your Apple Watch, even though that's why I started doing cardio. I've realized though that it's just about building a body that doesn't quit when your family or your work requires you to step in. So for me, I'm a videographer. It's a pretty active job sometimes, and then other times you're just sitting around, but like hauling gear, doing things where it's a physically active day, doing family stuff, I don't get tired as much. Having since introduced the 8 to 12K steps a day rule into my life, and that's kind of where I've stopped it. I haven't added all these crazy sessions. Now, for my weight training sessions, I do keep it pretty high intensity. I do supersets with minimal rest, and I just blast through it in 30 minutes. And so typically I do burn, somewhere in the 200-ish, maybe give or take 75 calories 3 times a week. And so that kind of does feel like I'm already pulling the first 2 levers of that cardio stack. So I hope you guys learned something, but that's just for me. Obviously, everyone's body is different. Everyone's schedule and the time that they have available is gonna be different. So do what works for you, do what's smart for you. I hope that you learned something in this video when it comes to cardio. Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys are thinking, what you learned, maybe what you're already doing. As always, you guys have value to add here in this conversation, so I'd love to hear it. God bless you, God bless your families. I hope you have a great week ahead, and I hope that maybe implementing one of these things into your life, especially the steps, like just start there. It will yield, I know it's gonna yield a massive, massive gain. Happy walking, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Peace out.